Welcome to the Riff. Today on the Riff, Jeremy and Justin sit down to talk about the power of community. They also talk about Jeremy's tendency to hug strangers at Chiefs games. Make sure to check out the show notes in this one to sign up to be a part of or to lead a JXP group here at North Point. We hope today is helpful and hopeful. Thanks for listening.
Well, welcome, Riff listeners. I hope you are having a lovely February. This is the season of love. And Justin, any big Valentine's plans? Anything like that?
I have 0 right now, but I've still got days.
But you have a Valentine.
I do.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited about. This. I don't know. This is, I think, Leanne and I's 27th, if we include dating, Valentine together. And
Wow.
I hear traditionally that is the gals, the 27th is the gals' time to really splurge on her man.
27 through 34.
Yep.
I don't know if that's in a book.
Yeah. So I'm.
That's exciting, man.
Exciting.
Oh my
I don't know.
goodness.
I've just cleared my calendar.
I can't wait to see what she does. It's going to be awesome.
Whether also it's kind of a very special time for me is college basketball starting to heat up here, and it's starting to warm up. It's spring. We like this season. So whether you're joining us from the Springfield area or part of our international following contingency,
I hate it when you do that. I hate it.
It's true.
I know, but I know that the podcast blew up internationally. I get it.
Yep.
I get it.
Yep.
It's just not something I like to talk about a lot. You know?
The only reason I do is because it's happening.
I know.
And I want to honor all the nations that are joining us today. So
I know.
Today we're talking about
community.
Boom.
Okay. So I think it's going to be a fun conversation. We're going to
That's a lot of pressure.
It might be a fun conversation.
Okay, there we go. I like that.
It might be.
Let's lower it.
We're going to be able to talk about the power of community, the power of social tribes, the power of this idea of not doing life alone. As we enter a season where we talk about JXP groups a lot.
JXP groups. Give us a little, this might be new. So tell us a little bit more about JXP.
Jesus Experience groups. So there's a podcast you can kind of go back on, and it's with you and Preston.
Yeah.
You guys sit down and you actually walk through a lot of that stuff in detail. It's a great episode to listen to. So push pause if you want to.
Yeah. Unpause.
Unpause. Oh man, they were freaking out right now. They were freaking out.
Alexa, push pause.
You can jump back, listen to that episode. But what those are is it's a group of people walking through the life of Jesus, right? And specifically through the book of Luke is what we're choosing to walk through as a community and as a church. And what's really cool about Jesus Experience is it's not just reading, right? And being like, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. All right, let's go live life. It's how do you actually take that reading, that learning, that reflection, and merge that into and infuse it and make it your life, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just a cool process and something that I've been excited about, something that Preston's been excited about, you've been excited about. It's a pretty cool deal. So,
So, and it's not too late to be part of something like that. Is obviously this series, The Journey, where we're looking at Jesus' journey all the way through Easter weekend. We'll be talking about that primarily through the book of Luke, but specifically these Jesus XP groups, looking at the book of Luke, reading it together, talking about how that Bible could integrate into our daily life through these conversations. Jump on our website, jump on the app, figure out, obviously there'll be some show notes here if you're doing this on YouTube, opportunities for you to get connected, and or just, it wouldn't be the craziest thing, just start your own. If you got some people in your world, you want to start walking through this together. Bottom line is, we're talking about community. So, community. You said something a little bit, social tribes. Social tribes. Talk to us a little bit about, this doesn't seem to be just a Christ-centric term that is just in the church. Even in some of the books we've been talking about, atomic habits. Atomic habits.
That's how you say it.
That's how I said atomic habits. Okay. So in the book Atomic Habits, tell us a little bit about what you were walking through the impact of community.
If you haven't read that book, we'll put that in the show notes as well. Great book. It's about small habits, right? Yeah. And how these small things will end up being something large in your life. James Clear, which is the author, was on a podcast recently on Entre Leadership, which is a Ramsey podcast. Kind of a rival of ours, really. Like I would look at us and Ramsey as kind of rivals.
We're not above honoring our rivals.
So I honor
one team,
them.
one dream.
Probably the same amount of listeners. I haven't looked.
They have a little more.
Do they?
They have a little more.
Do they really?
More. Yeah. Right. I don't. Whenever this is dropped, I'm not sure. But as of recording, yes, a little bit more.
So if you're listening, Dave, good to have you hear us, man. He's an old friend of ours.
Yeah.
Anyways, so in that book, he kind of walks through on that podcast of a question that was asked of, is there anything that you regret writing, or is there anything that you would want to write about more after that book was released?
Okay.
He had a great answer to it. Great question.
I love the question.
But one of his things that he talked about was social tribes.
Okay.
And about how he wished he would have written more about the power of community in habit making and habit forming. So he talks about, in that podcast specifically, about how this idea of a social tribe or a community or a group of people actually will influence your habit or your life more than anything else that you're a part of. So it's just interesting to see that as we walk through these groups and these JXP pieces, there is power, right, in Christ. There is power but there's power in community, right? Like Jesus had a tribe of people for a reason. He had people around him for a reason. So there's power in it. So I just kind of want to walk through a couple of different questions with you of where have you seen that in your life, right? And what kind of communities have you been a part of that you're like, oh yeah, without that community, I don't think I would have been here or there, right?
Yeah.
So one of those questions I have, if you listen to the last episode,
Coach Clayton.
Oh my goodness. That guy.
He's a treasure.
Like a legend, man.
He is a legend.
He is.
Yeah.
Good night. So if you haven't listened to that one, pause it right now.
Alexa, unpause.
This is good. This is good. Listen to that one. But you're a character coach for Missouri State.
Yes.
So you're able to have a community that a lot of people probably are not able to be a part of, right? I mean,
well,
in this,
unless you're a coach
or
of basketball at Missouri State. Yeah.
So kind of explain to me, man, like what has that done for you? What kind of power has that brought? What have you seen that do for you, for coach, for the team, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Okay. So, a little context even going into this, when we think community, because I want to walk through, I think this is a great example of community. But some people might think, oh, I go to church, I'm part of community. And that's not what we're talking about. That's crowd. Now, I hope it's encouraging. But it'd be like, for me, if I go to a Chiefs game, love it. I can hug someone I don't know when the Chiefs score a touchdown.
Do you?
Yeah.
Really?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I get excited, man.
You've never hugged me. So I've never...
Because I know you.
Okay, yeah.
I said hug someone I don't know.
Totally. I'm not reading into that at all.
No.
That's cool.
We get excited. We walk out thinking we have this shared moment. We did, but I don't know them. But it's a great experience. But fantasy football, I know the guys, right? We have constant interaction, right? Mm-hmm. Church is a shared experience. That's really cool, but doesn't mean you're in community. It means you have a shared value, a shared experience. And while I think that's powerful, community is different. Community is intentional.
This is super important. I think we saw this in COVID a lot, where people would come to church, right? And you would think, I've got a community, and then you would lose your community because you actually weren't in community. You just came to an event, right?
Yeah, and I don't know whose fault that is. I mean, I think it's just the nature of the situation is, if you have a very valuable experience going to a Chiefs game, going to church, and it's meaningful to you, sometimes by default, we assume that's community and we put it in a category that it isn't. That means because this was meaningful to me, I'm known by all these people as well. And then when life exposes that maybe you're not, you're in a really tough situation to identify I wasn't in community or that wasn't very meaningful. And that's a tough situation to be in. And so I think people accidentally find themselves disappointed with their Christian community when the reality is maybe they didn't have Christian community. They just had a Christian shared experience. And so what we want to do is we want to have real community. So when it comes to what does that look like in my life, and I've said this a lot, is that it doesn't matter to me if you have intentional Christian community that is a North Point group or not. Now, we want to have a lot of North Point groups, but bottom line, you have to have community. So for me, I'm a character coach. What that means is every week of the year, I meet with Coach Ford. Because he's the basketball coach at Missouri State. And I meet, so we meet one-on-one. We talk about everything from life. We talk about scripture. We talk about whatever's helpful. We have a very regular set time where we meet. And there's times that come up where, hey, it doesn't work. We change it. I always want to have something prepared that we can talk about, but I always let whatever is going on in the world trump that. Like in the world, meaning my world and his world, trump that. I also then meet with the group of, it's about 8 to 10 different coaches on the staff in different roles for the basketball team. We meet weekly as a group then. And again, that's going to be a little bit more structured because there's more of us there where I'm always going to bring something to the table, but it always needs to be flexible to deal with what's going on. Because while curriculum and content is a part of it, community is the core of it. And so it is, how can we help each other? So for us, and I got to tell you, the first time I walked in a coach's office, the first time I met with all of the coaches, and it's kind of, I feel out of place. It feels unnatural. I'm like, what am I going to talk about? It feels content heavy. Like, is this the right curriculum? And what am I going to say? Are they going to like me? I felt all of that on my way to my first meetings with them. But then over time, the more we get to know each other, I realize the content isn't key. The connection and community is key. Always have something that's meaningful and helpful. Okay, we want to bring those tools. But what happened now is the community became important, and then that becomes a basis from which anything that goes on in life, a family situation, a work situation, a winning streak, a losing streak in our setting. All of a sudden now, because we've had those intentional investments, now we have natural conversations anytime. I say that's been my group for 5 years. Now I'm in a couple other groups as well, just because there's some other things I'm really invested in, whether it's at North Point or different things, but that's been probably the most consistent, intentional group I've been a part of. And why I share those specific things is because if you're going to join a Jesus XP or you're going to start a group, it's probably going to feel very unnatural at first and very intentional. And you're going to have the feelings of when you walk into that coffee shop for the first time, or you open up your house and you're like, who's going to show up? Did they even want to be here? Is it worth my time? Is it worth their time? Those are all natural conversations that you're going to have until you've done the unnatural enough times. You've developed a natural connection where you don't worry about that stuff anymore. So my thought is, good, meaningful community starts off by unnatural, stuffy, intentional appointments. But when you do that enough time, then it can turn into natural community. So that's why at North Point, we have to have those tribes of people who put in the unnatural times that are intentional so they can have eventually natural relationships.
That's so good, man.
It's meaningful, yeah.
How do you get into a space? Have you been a part of a group or a setting like that hasn't been life-giving, that hasn't brought a happy ending type of story of like, man, that group just changed my life, or it might have,
yeah,
but not for like, the best.
I've led lots of them. So yeah, it's not weird for me at all, because I also believe I don't want to put this weird pressure on a group. And even with Jesus XP, we're not going to say, hey, at the end of 6 or 8 weeks, you're going to exchange best friend bracelets.
We're not doing that?
Well, not all of them.
Okay, great.
Not all of them are doing that. But the whole point is this: you got to recognize, okay, what is the purpose of this? We talked about our rival on podcast, Dave Ramsey. I've been in and led Dave Ramsey groups that I had zero intention to be in this for 6 years. It was for a very specific season. And the reason we're all in this room is we want to talk about financial freedom. And, we're going to have assignments, we're going to have a deadline, and then we're going to be done meeting. And now we always have this connection, or we've done a parenting group before where it's a season. Now we have a connection. We've known each other a little bit more. And I wouldn't say community has been developed, but I would say you developed a connection. Out of those things, sometimes community happens. So you got to understand, what is the purpose of this? Our Jesus XP groups, or a lot of the groups we have at North Point, aren't trying to give you a soulmate or even a lifelong best friends. What we're trying to do is get you in the rhythm of intentional community practices. Will community happen? Maybe. Will this be just a season of life where you get to know some people better and make a bigger church feel smaller? Learn some names, not just some faces, and some stories, and then maybe learn a little bit more about Scripture? Yeah. And is that helpful? Yes. But bottom line, what do we want in every Christian's life at North Point? Ongoing community. People in your life that you know. Now, does that mean you have to meet every Tuesday night? No. But I promise you this, if you don't have strong community in your life, then at least invest the next 6 to 8 Tuesday nights or Thursday mornings or Wednesday Chick-fil-A lunches or whatever it might be. Find a bunch of connections and see if community develops, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm hoping is happening, is that people start building the muscles of community, because I think we live in a world where we don't sit on the front porches and just look for excuses to talk to neighbors anymore as much as our previous generations did. We know when we can hit the garage door so it's raised just enough when we pull in and close it. We go through drive-throughs. During even through a pandemic, a lot of times we've lost the natural ability just to be able to talk with other people, get to know each other. And so these groups are an opportunity to develop some of that.
I think it's interesting. One of the things you say often is the only way to change your life is to change your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, wish there were a shortcut.
Yeah, so I think, too, on this, I'd love to hear your perspective and maybe some ideas. Like, there's so many, myself included, right? There's so many times Jamie and I have wanted to join another group or this or that. And every single time, the first thing we say is, yeah, but we've got, or, oh yeah, we've got to do, we're just too busy, right? It's that kind of just process of, I know it's important, but for some reason I've filled my calendar with less important things. But because it's on the calendar, it's the most important thing now, right?
Yeah.
So how do you and Leanne walk through that? How do you guys carve time? How do you make time? How do you prioritize those pieces? What do you do as kind of a cycle to where you're like, okay, I know that this is a healthy piece to have in my life. How do I make sure that I'm intentional about having it in my life?
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between finding time and making time, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a key. Is most people are busy. There's enough things going on that we've all got demands around us. So you got to make time. If you're waiting to find time to invest in community, you're not going to have it. It's like investing your finances. It's not out of the margin. It has to come up at the top if you want to invest for the future. So if you're always waiting to invest in your future till if you have enough money left at the end of the month, it's not a good strategy. So when it comes to Leanne and I, community is important. Community for Leanne is even a value that seems more urgent to her, whether it's personality style or whatnot. And so that's a conversation we often have is let's make sure we're investing in relationships. So whether it's, hey, let's this week, is this a week for a breakfast date with friends? Is this a week for pickleball with friends? Let's make sure we're spending time. And we have an amazing community of North Pointers, right? That we know care and that we care for, but we also have to have an invested, regular investment of time with friends so that we might not have we don't have agendas when we go out and hang most of the time, but now we've developed enough time and connection so that we're in each other's lives whenever something comes up. And so I just believe it's as simple as saying, hey, let's not go a couple weeks without investing in community, figuring out. And for us, it's just a lot of times it starts socially and it continues socially. For me, there's guys that I'm in a very social conversation with all the time in a text thread, phone calls, and then every year we get together and it's about the college basketball, but it's about more than college basketball. We've been doing this for 16 years. We spend a week together, and that's just kind of a unique, bizarre deal that we did, and then we just haven't stopped. But bottom line, these are some of my best friends in the world, and we probably wouldn't do it if it was curriculum based, and we probably wouldn't do it if it was accountability based. We do it because it's friendship based, and with that comes any type of resource, help, hope, accountability, curriculum as needed. So
what would you say to somebody that is thinking about like joining a JXP group?
Yep.
Right. And it does seem like it's like we talk about it, going through the book of Luke, they have no Bible knowledge, right?
Yeah.
It could feel very intimidating to be like, oh, awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to get together with a bunch of strangers to read a book that I've really never read through the entirety of it. I can't wait. Where do I sign up? So like what would you say to that person that's thinking through those pieces? Because I know at North Point, hopefully there's a lot of that, right? Like that's... Yeah.
I would start by saying how weird it is, okay? Like, if some dude invited me to a book study, the answer is no. I'm not going to a book study, right? You're going to assign me a book and hopefully you can pick me to read out loud, right? No. And then what do I think about that book? So it just sounds so bizarre. So I would start by saying, validate your feelings.
Yeah.
Yes, it's as bizarre as it sounds, okay? You probably haven't done this since Great Expectations in your sophomore year. Now, with that said, let me tell you why it's still important.
Yeah.
Because what it is saying there's very few people among us that say, man, we are just natural orators. We love this. What we're doing is saying, hey, I want to become a little bit more like Jesus. I want to get to know who he was. I want to become a little bit more like him. So let's talk about this. Let's all do this from the common ground of this is foreign. And so if we start that, so you don't have to show up. There is nobody in your group who's hoping you impress them in your group. There's no one there that's supposed to be good at this stuff. All we're doing is saying, we're not even assuming you read it beforehand. We're not even going to ask you to read it there. We're just going to say, hey, let's walk through this. Someone's going to read some of this stuff. Let's talk about it. And bottom line is what we're trying to do is not get a bunch of people who love reading, not a bunch of people who are familiar with scripture, but just a group of people who are interested in exploring who Jesus was and looking at what it might be if he were a bigger part of us. What would that look like? What would that look like in my job? What would that look like in my dorm? What would that look like with my parenting? And then it's not about a book study. It's not about who's the most spiritual person in this room. It is all of a sudden about, I want to become more like Jesus. And hearing you talk about your struggles with that illuminates my own life. And now I'm connected with you in your weakness, in your aspirations, in your struggles. And that's why we want to see 80 plus tribes gathering to say, hey, there might not be anything in common. We might not vote alike. We might not be in the same tax bracket. I might not even want to hang out with you after this thing, but I'm wildly curious about how you're becoming more like Jesus and struggling to do so as well. And if we do that together, my hunch is we're going to grow in our knowledge of who he is. We're going to grow in our ability to reflect who he is in our own life. And I also have a hunch that we might find someone there that we want community with. So that's what we want to do.
That's great, man.
Well, here's what I promise we won't do. Here's what I promise I wouldn't do if I were leading one of these things. And I hope all of our leaders are listening to this, is don't publicly say on the last week, how many of you want to just keep going for every Tuesday for the next 6 years?
That's
because
the pressure.
I'd be the dude in the group who's like, heck no. But I'm also enough weak Enneagram 3 that I'd be like, yeah, that sounds great. And I just no-show. So what we're trying to say is, no, we're not trying to backdoor you into lifetime commitment with a bunch of strangers that you showed up at a coffee shop with. Mm-hmm. At the same time, how, hopefully, those you want to connect with afterwards, man, pick up the phone, get their number, connect. But more than that, you are developing the rhythms of understanding Jesus, understanding his role in your life, understanding how to have these intentional conversations. Now, take this into your natural relationships. Side note, whole different conversation. If you don't have natural relationships, maybe you can get some natural relationships out of here. Mm-hmm. And then there's books on how to have friends, right? And figure out how to put yourself in social circles. What we want to do is develop intentional rhythms that can really enhance natural relationships.
It's so good, man. It sounds important. It's hard to do.
Yeah.
But I hope that we as a church are making it as easy as possible and as clear as possible in how to get involved. Right? Yeah. Like, yes. You said this too, like you want those resources, those groups at an arm's distance, right? Yes. To where it's not somebody's got to go through A, B, C, D. This is it. Like JXP is going to be very easy to lead, very easy to be a part of. So I don't know why you wouldn't.
Yeah.
I mean, show up one time, be like, this is weird. As you said, be like, yeah, I knew he said it would. Show up another time, see if it sticks, see if it changes a habit. Like
And if you understand the goal is developing the rhythms of a follower of Jesus.
Right.
And developing the rhythms and the attributes of what Christian community looks like, right? Of having intentional conversations with natural relationships. We also understand the challenges. These aren't natural relationships for a lot of these groups. Maybe they're strangers or acquaintances, and that's fine. So we understand that. So if you find that's where the awkwardness is, no worries. Take those rhythms, lean into it for 6 weeks, but then take those rhythms, develop it on your own with your own natural relationships, or figure out how to develop natural relationships. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way because it's tougher in this generation. But we have to get natural relationships. Now at North Point, we'll try and create different venues for you to meet people, but we can't create venues for you to have natural, growing, lifelong relationships. But if you meet enough people, hopefully, you'll grow some natural relationships. So you've been involved in groups, you've led groups. What are those? How does someone get the most out of those from your experience? You've probably seen people who didn't get a lot out of it, and probably saw people who got a lot out of it, and you were probably part of all of that. So
I think
what do you think?
I think to an extent you get what you expect.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you expect for your marriage to suck, it might suck. Yeah. Right? But if you expect you're going to have a thriving one, it might thrive. So I think the same thing goes with groups. Anything that we've walked into, I've walked into situations where I've thought, this is not going to be great. And there were a lot of things about it that weren't. And then I was like, you know what? Jamie's all about paradigm shifting and making sure that you're thinking the right thoughts. So we go to the next
and counseling, all that
something
stuff
like that. So I go to the next one and I have a completely different mindset, right? So I don't know if it was necessarily the different people in the room, but I think it's how I'm entering that room, right? So that for me is key to make sure that I'm entering the space. I can still have my negative thoughts, but I can still have this like positive outlook of this is going to change my life, right? I really do think that. And there have been some pretty powerful moments, some pretty powerful relationships. So I'm here because of a group. Like, it's crazy. I mean, we got married 15 years ago, and we're like, I don't know. We didn't have community. Like, we got married really young. All of our friends are not married and doing things that married people don't do. Like, so we're like, we don't want to hang out with them. What do? Right? We started going to North Point. And they had this stupid, exactly what you're talking about. It's like this speed dating thing. Like, I'm like, we're not going to that. And I remember we're sitting in our apartment and it's late and we're just like, let's just try it. And we met the Cogswells, right? Dan and Patty. And it changed everything for us, right? Like they just understood community and they understood the power of it, which helped us understand, there's power in this.
Yeah.
And we still talk to people from that group 15 years ago. Now, we're not in that group, right? That would be weird as well. If we're like, we found it. We found our tribe. Well, I mean, we all grow, right?
Yeah.
So it's been something that's been a huge part of us, whether it be a group at a house or a group at a coffee shop. We've done classes, we've led classes that are on site at a campus. Out of every one of them, no matter where I entered, whether it would be negative or positive, I walked out with a relationship. So lowest ladder on the whole thing, right? At least you're going to walk out with knowing someone. Exactly what you're saying. I knew at least when I showed up on Sunday, I could say, hey, and then their name instead of, hey, you. Good to see you, man. How you been? I don't know who that was, right? So at least you have that, and hopefully you have more.
So a couple questions. Are groups for people who are brand new to the journey of faith? Is that all our groups are for?
No. One of the beautiful things was in that first group that I was a part of way back when there were so many people that were like seasoned veterans in Christianity, and so many people that were like, I don't really know if I buy into this. So it was like, which creates shockingly phenomenal discussion, right? I mean, I think you lead this place in a really safe way to make sure that people are understanding what it means to be a safe place. It means that I'm open to what you say, right? Like, I'm not just going to shut you out. Like, let's have conversation. Let's get to the table and talk. And it was just cool. It was just such a cool experience to see. And there were definitely people I'm like, I do not agree with that at all. Tell me more, right? Like, it's just it's a space that, everybody is welcome to.
So we don't have the time on a typical weekend service to go around and do Q&A at all the campuses and Zoom those in as well. Groups are different. So I assume everyone agrees with everything I say on a weekly basis. But one of the beauties about a group is to be able to push back. Talk to me more about this, exactly what you're saying. And we can grow because it is a dialogue and not a monologue. And so I would say for those of you who are North Pointers, who you've got a strong faith, and maybe you don't need community. I totally get it because you have it. That don't mean you don't need community. You don't need more community because you have it. One of the missions is to be able to provide those rhythms for people on the journey who need to know who Jesus is and what it's all about, or those who need to know what community is all about, right? And so I'm so thankful for those who are leading these groups or attending the groups, who are just saying, hey, take your season experience and be a part of someone else's journey. So I love that. And if this is new for you, it's as weird as you think it is, but meaning, this might be not something you're used to, but don't be afraid of that. That's what we're all doing is what would it look like if Jesus lived nowadays in our lives? What would look different? Let's talk about that. And let's bring our questions, our amazements, our curiosities. Let's all bring it to the table. As a church, we don't want to be just a crowd that has a shared experience. Though I'm not ripping the shared experience. I look forward to our weekends. But let's be people who are on this movement, who are learning who Jesus is, reflecting him more. We do that best when we have pockets of community that we're growing from. And so let's fight for intentional rhythms and conversations we bring to natural relationships that we have. And so whichever end you need to build in your repertoire and your toolbox is a great chance to do so. So whether it's Jesus XP, again, there's lots of ways on our resources. We're always going to be looking for opportunities to grow in these areas, but let's be people of a tribe.
Good.
So
I got to apologize. I feel like I've been distracted this whole episode.
Wow. Is it something I'm wearing?
I love your flannel.
Thank you.
But I'm still just thinking back to the fact that you hugged a stranger at the Chiefs game.
Yeah.
And we have desks pretty close to one another, and we've watched a game together.
Yeah.
Even in the office, and even when they score, it's just kind of a, hey.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, it was a long time ago. It was 27 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was a blonde gal, and she was 3 rows ahead of me. And I saw her, and I looked for opportunities. So the next time the Chiefs scored a touchdown, I think it was Len Dawson, right before he lit a cigarette on the sideline, he had scored a touchdown. So I ran up to this blonde gal, and I gave her a hug in the height of the touchdown frenzy, and introduced myself. Her name was Leanne, and now we've been married.
That's right.
25 years, celebrating our 27th Valentine's Day, and she's going to get me something special.
So
Not all of those details were true.
But her name's Leanne, right?
Her name is Leanne.
Yeah, so that was true.
We didn't meet at Chiefs game, and I for sure have never hugged you, but I'm looking forward to hugging you one day. Maybe I mean, not today, but one day.
All right,
So,
Chiefs.
go
Super
Chiefs.
Bowl. Come on.
Yeah, catch me in a weak moment. Thank you so much for listening. And Dave Ramsey, again, that means the world to us that you would listen today. So thanks so much.
So nice. See you, Dave.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Riff. We'll have a brand new episode every week, wherever you find podcasts.